Good. Yeah. So hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I lived in Red Hook for a while, and I was living there when Hurricane Sandy came in October of 2012. And I was in medical school at the time. I finished my medical training since then, and I now live in Germany. But at the time, I was a medical student living in Red Hook, pretty close to the water on Brunt Street. And so I was there during the onset of the flood and was in pretty frequent contact with everyone else in the neighborhood who I was friends with while everyone was watching the water flood their apartment buildings. And after the storm came and obviously left a huge amount of destruction all over the neighborhood. There were cars, rolled over, buildings destroyed. I mean, people's houses were a total mess. We basically realized that the neighborhood was in very bad shape. And even more importantly, there were people living in the apartments and in the homes in Red Hook who were in really bad shape. And because I was in medical school at the time, I was mainly focused on the medical problem created by the storm, which was frankly something that I had learned about in med school regarding Hurricane Katrina. Now, I don't know if you folks, I'm not sure how old you are or how old you were during Hurricane Katrina, but Hurricane Katrina was a major hurricane in the south of the US that flooded and destroyed New Orleans. And we had read about it in medical school, and it was one of the topics of our courses regarding disaster medicine. And we had learned that after Hurricane Katrina, there were a lot of people who were stuck in their homes, who had all kinds of medical conditions that couldn't be treated because of the disaster from the storm. And so I started to think, I wonder if there are people in Red Hook who are in a similar situation after Hurricane Sandy. And so the kind of people that I'm talking about are, let's say you're a diabetic. I don't know if you folks, what grade is everyone in? Okay, so you guys will definitely be familiar with diabetes. So, diabetics have trouble controlling the sugar, the glucose in their blood. And they need a really important medicine called insulin. And if they don't get insulin every day, basically, they will get very sick and maybe even die. And so these were the kind of people that we were really worried about after Hurricane Sandy, that they were stuck in their homes and they didn't have access to their normal insulin treatment. And so that if they didn't get treated soon enough, that they could be in trouble. And so there are a lot of people like this in Red Hook, not just people who have diabetes, but people who have all kinds of problems. And this is really what led me and a whole bunch of volunteers. So I should say I was working with hundreds of people who were volunteers at the time, including Carolina, to try and figure out a way to help these people after the storm. And so we basically created a volunteer medical relief system to treat patients in Red Hook who were in trouble. And that was kind of the kickoff of the whole story.
Yeah, let's see if they have any comments or questions. I think someone was here during Katrina, and I don't want to burn you out telling everything before the other set of students get here. So anyone in the room, anything you want to say or ask? You're asking him or me? So Matt, he was asking, the students asking, were there any kind of key moments, anything really memorable? Do you mean during the storm, or recovery is called the response? During the storm or the recovery? During the recovery, he's asking something particularly memorable. Something, there may be many, but that's.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Similar to people that have diabetes, there are people in Red Hook who have other medical conditions, in particular the seniors in the community. We were really concerned in particular about the seniors who might be stuck in the towers that maybe you saw when you were walking through Red Hook, on the top floor, and the elevators don't work, and they can't take the stairs. And so one person we found out about had been stuck in his apartment for about 2 weeks. And because all of the utilities were out after the storm, we heard that he was boiling water in his apartment to stay warm because it was the winter time, so it was really cold. So we went to go check on him, and we opened the door, and he was in one of the upper floors of the towers. So we climb all the way up there, no elevator kind of situation. It's totally dark because all the lights are out. And we open the door to his apartment, and steam floods into the hallway. And we peek inside, and it looks like a rainforest or something. Like water is dripping from the ceiling. Everything is wet because he's been boiling water basically for 2 weeks straight to try and heat the apartment. And he was an older gentleman who had heart problems. And while we were there, we were talking to him, and we said, "Sir, can we help you? Can we please take your blood pressure to see how you're doing?" Because, he had heart problems. He had high blood pressure. He hadn't been taking his blood pressure medications because he couldn't get out of his apartment to go to the pharmacy. And the phones weren't working, so he couldn't call the pharmacy. And he was an older gentleman, so he didn't have a smartphone. So we said, "Sir, can we just take your blood pressure? We're concerned about your heart." And while he was taking off his jacket so he could take his blood pressure, he basically started to have a heart attack. So he had like crushing chest pain. He said, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest. His left arm started to hurt. Very, very classic heart attack. And we were lucky that we were just there when it started to happen. So we were able to get him out of the apartment and get him to the emergency room. And they basically saved his life in the emergency room. So they took him to the cath lab and basically opened up the blood vessel in his heart. And the blood flow went back to his heart, and it saved his life. So that was a great example of a really, really close call that we had. And that older gentleman was representative, I think, of a lot of people who are at risk in Red Hook, who are really just at the borderline of having a serious medical event. So we were trying to catch all of those people before the serious medical event would happen.
That's a compelling story. Yeah. So, Matt, follow-up question from the same student. In your experience, what part of Red Hook was the worst, as he put it? Worst was not defined, so I'd leave it to you to talk about your personal worst.
Yeah, so of course, the parts of Red Hook that were most affected by the storm were the parts that were the closest to the water. So the flood, rose into Red Hook from the sea, and the areas of Red Hook closest to the water were affected the most. But frankly, the flood was so intense that it kind of went everywhere. And I think, Carolina, you even showed them the flood map, or will show them the flood map.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet. I can pop it up on the screen in the PowerPoint. Have any of you seen this flood map, by the way? Let me turn the light off. We have it online. By the way, Karen and Vanessa, if you want to speak now, I'm going to go with mobile students. I don't know whether yeah, I figure. No, we're meeting in the winter.
come in, but it went out to 15, 20. So again, the advantage was really the fact that we had most of our equipment in the basement in the development, and that most people who own houses here have a basement level. And so those areas, once those areas got water, you know, and the panel, the mechanical elevator part, that's what left this community out of power for a considerable amount of time. But people were given an option to that. I did not, because neighbors like this guy didn't want to do. So when you're an organizer like the National Night or myself, we don't abandon ship before we get people at home. So usually somebody organizes and actually practice, and those people are unable to evaluate or unwilling to do that. Also, hi, I'm Katrina. We are still, I know we don't like to think, we are doing a program right here, I got here on this aspect, water and road technology. I know that the development and houses are still having residential effects because of standing. Moving it's probably a job to do that stuff sustainable and the things we have to determine now, and we're going to, we're on eggshells because it's before we see the ground is now currently open all the way to the whole development. So what they do, kind of saying, yeah, I don't think it would have seems to be sustainable. So our business are still eroding the amount of gold down that way. I was looking for
Okay, Matt, they're coming in now.
Okay.
They had our New York commuting experience. I hope we have enough seats for everyone. This is looking like maybe we don't. There are 2 more folding chairs in the hallway if we don't have quite enough. I don't know how everybody is here. Okay, I just need to check in with the staff on this. Since it's now, we've lost almost a half an hour. Do you guys have the option to have this run later, or am I going to truncate the program so that we stick on the same schedule? Who can answer that from CAS for the school? Can I hear from a staff person associated with the Houston team, please? My question is, you're about half an hour late. Can the whole program run later, or do I have to now take a half an hour out of the schedule because you've got to stay on the schedule? Okay, we will try and do that. All right, Matt. So the person on the screen here is known as Medical Matt. He's actually now in Germany. Let's see what his time availability is. Matt, how are you for time right now?
I'm okay.
Okay, so then let me check in with what I'm going to do then, because there's been some discussion on his thing for the local students, and I've heard some of the residents of public housing talking. I'm going to kick off the PowerPoint and try and fly through it, and then we'll get back to Medical Matt. And what I would say, Matt, is this time I would focus in just on what I said, the operational stuff. They can read about you stepped up, their health issues that can become acute in a storm, yada, yada. We're at it, we've lost a lot of time, so just dump that for the newcomers and get right into how you actually did this and keeping it short. Now I'm going to minimize you on the screen now and go to our PowerPoint.
Go for it.
Okay, so for all of you who just arrived, can you hear me clearly? Okay, so my name is Carolina Salguero, or if you speak Spanish, Carolina Salguero. My father was an immigrant from Spain. Oh, and happy St. Patty's Day, everybody, I forgot. Happy St. Patrick's. So I am the executive director of the nonprofit PortSide, New York, running this event. This is Peter Rothenberg. He's our historian and curator. He was actually with me on our ship, Mary Whalen. We were looking at her during Hurricane Sandy. We had other staff at the time who helped set up our Sandy Recovery Center who aren't here right now. So this, we've obviously not made that. Can I see a show of hands from you guys? We sent like 6 pages of background information. Who read that? Really? Okay, but that's really helpful. So then I'm just going to fly through this stuff, moving along. So you would have seen that map. This describes part of our flooding problem. This was all brought over here. This is infill here. This is filled out. We're in Atlantic Basin right now, which was built out, dug in and built out and around there. So low-lying groundwater coming up, but what the map doesn't show is right off of here is a very high hill, and so we are the bottom of the watershed, the sewer shed. So the way the sewer system is run, it collects water up there. So when we had Sandy, we had seawater, groundwater coming up, rainwater, and then the sewer too. So we are particularly vulnerable here. So this map, if you look at it up close, Red Hook, the current definition of Red Hook ends with the highway. The white is where it didn't flood very little. There's a little nubbin right here that's dry. That was where our Sandy recovery thing was. And right here. But this was formerly Cypress Island, the highest point, not very high, and they leveled it to fill around it. But there's a memory there of former land stuff. So at the time of Sandy, PortSide was not here. We were in the container port nearby. That is, let me turn the lights. This is Manhattan as the power starts to go out. So that's the boat you've seen. This is where we were located at the time. So where we are now is right down here. Our normal location was there to protect the storm. I had her moved there. Oops, how did that happen? I hit end. Good work. So this is a view of flooding from the Mary Whalen. That's a floating container behind us. This was some damage to some of our stuff. So PortSide's story includes preparing for the storm and responding. The response is called recovery in the disaster jargon. This is a tanker very similar to our own. I got a lot of phone calls like, are you aground? Are you aground? We also prevented the Mary Whalen from damaging property. Like here, this was in Red Hook and Erie Basin to the barge that got hung up on the pier, causing damage to boat and pier. I'm going to blow through this. You can read all about what we did. So we set up our Sandy Aid Center in a real estate office. I highly recommend that because all of those little racks for the normal house listings are great for disaster information. So Red Hook is an unusual community. There's a lot of lending, and we don't have the square pegs fitting the round holes. So there was also an art gallery in there. So we had the most stylish, disaster center. I recommend art in disaster areas. This is Peter here with the braid. We set up I realize the Port Authority is in here. We're supposed to have 2 Port Authority people. Is there a Port Authority person in the room? No. So that's Peter running a router up a tree because we were told the real estate office had internet. We got there and it didn't. It was supposed to have Verizon, and a very senior person at the Port Authority used to be the lobbyist for the cell phone industry in the Northeast. His name is John Leantonio. So I called him up and I said, John, we got a problem here. We're setting up an aid center that's supposed to have internet to help people. There is no Verizon. Do you still know the president of Verizon? He goes, yes. I said, can you please call him and see what you can do? And that expedited getting Verizon reconnected in Red Hook. Thank you, John Leantonio. So that's an idea of what our center looked like. Now, in our case, there's lots of forms of recovery work. So we were not primarily delivering food, for example, or stuff or tools. It was mainly what I would call distributing of information, connecting people to resources, like an angel electrician shows up. We connected him to dozens of homes that he inspected and repaired, meetings with lawyers, stuff like that. Now, you will see as you walk around Red Hook, there's clearly a divide. And this is called the back here, where there's a lot more money. People tend to be overwhelmingly white. The public housing, there's less money, and it's people of color. And so that was clear in our aid center. We did not, because of where it was located in the back, serve very many public housing residents. And that is the geography of Red Hook. For me personally, uncomfortable, but a bunch of us, particularly, Karen Blondell, when I was always talking about social cohesion, it's a goal. She's working toward, oh, I did hit the wrong thing. And so this here is one of the things that I was told running the aid center over and over again that really resonated with the PortSide staff. And we spent hours and hours and days discussing this. People told me exactly that. They told us to evacuate for Hurricane Irene and nothing happened, so we thought we would be okay. And what that told me was that people didn't understand what I, as a maritime person, called marine weather. And so the reaction was the weatherman was wrong or government was wrong. They're both stupid, expletives, and then inaction. And so we have been trying at PortSide to get people to both understand the weather as well as know what to do, because the instructions were not wrong. The hurricane changed its path, and there we were. Now I can't see my keys. All right, so Karen and Vanessa, this is where I have the NYCHA slides. Do you want me to just slide through them to show them what it looks like? Because some of these students, when they go through the neighborhood, the visitors will not be going through NYCHA at all. Okay, so this is an overview. It shows you the size of this, and also I want to point out it shows how green it was before the resiliency project starts. So this is pumping out the cellars. So while I was in our recovery center, there was a worker for NYCHA and maintenance who lived on Dykeman Street out of public housing, and he told me that the water came up for 4 days. Remember what I said about groundwater? That's not seawater then. That's groundwater. That's an electrical panel. So the resiliency, there's a really big project. It's FEMA, it's federal money. It is to deal with the exterior resiliency questions. It does not address the inexcusably horrible, conditions that NYCHA has allowed to exist inside the apartments. So, and this is lily pads is about raising it. They're going to put their utilities in new buildings. If the drawings and the renderings look terrific, I'm sorry they're low res. I've read them off the internet. I forget what's supposed to be in there. Ultimately, they're going to be new community centers and whatever else. But doing this project, cut down, what is it, Karen? Over 400 trees? Right. So, this has made it very hot on top of ugly, and the trenching to get at the utilities to change this looks like this. So a green campus. So during this project, all the exterior kind of amenities, lawns, sprinklers, playgrounds, seating's ripped up, piles of dirt, toxic. Spaces like this, and this is going on during the pandemic. So, and then the work was stopped actually when Governor Cuomo said all non-essential work needs to be stopped. Somehow this was deemed non-essential. So, do you all want to talk? I heard when I came in, you were explaining about the flood came in now with all this. Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah. The assembly and all methods, line, even though we do want to reach out transitional energy growth goals by 2030 to 2050 respectively. They're still using steam lines, so that's a lot of like they're going to put these bookend central heating plants on both ends of the campus when they get warm or wide. Those bookends then need to be transformers that are even in front of certain people's windows. So they took out the windows out of people's apartments. So they had less windows in a bedroom. And they have this actual three-story building attached to that. In order to bring in, I thought it's a horrible design, but we weren't organized enough to really get it. The design, and plus they will use this excuse that they don't like to spend a lot of money on housing, and use this like national conversation around who's in public housing. But please keep in mind that New York's fair market rate and the amount that they charge for rent and the things
Yeah,
And so people in the house and can be paying in anywhere between $50 a month rent, all the way up to $2,000 and $2,000. And it really does run. That's not true. But anyhow, I want to keep that in mind. Keep in mind that these buildings are 1939. That's the year that they were built. And so we have a lot of the asbestos, the mold, even though asbestos doesn't grow, there's some kind of method that labor uses that you don't actually just get it all out at the same time. And there are certain areas like around the gas line where they still insulate gas lines with asbestos. So we really need to transition into renewable energy, but then, we have to keep in mind we have a labor force. We have policies that could prevent public housing from actually moving into the next phase of the business inside the apartment. That's where we come in. We're part of the Red West Board, and I'm also a Harvard Low Fellow. But I've been spending the last year in Cambridge on just pushing the idea around civic engagement, educating residents on physical needs. One of these processes that are going on around rental, because each one of these impacts the other. So you can't have work being done in the development that doesn't impact businesses or shouldn't impact them in a beneficial way around rental. We believe in localism, and we believe that we should be creating social cohesion so that when the government is not here to save us in those original hours, days, weeks, we will have a network between PortSide's, Brunt Street, Resident Council, and our other organizations to sustain that community.
Vanessa, can you speak up just a little bit?
Which I think you might be starting to why we're going about so long, at least the first government development process of the actually get people to see it, right? And what I was explaining to them is that we pray until this is complete every day, that you can see the pictures, but you really see it visually when you are looking out and functioning there. That if there was a if it's a bad rainstorm too bad, it will be in trouble. Now, in front of the development to the back, as you told me how big the campus is, if too much rain comes, we're in trouble, or windstorm, trees start falling. So I think we're more at risk prior to it because now we are open, so openly to president and investors. So in my race for God this year, we did not have an understanding, but I think we have at least again had 2 years of dealing with being, open. Our children have no way to play other than the park. Little in the building. They removed the 47 tree where the elderly would be able to come outside and sit in front of the building. Some of them, like any other family, grandmother watched the children, she was picking up from school while your mom work or whatever it takes to be. Those things are taken away. Also, no longer have the senior citizen on this end of the development because it just didn't get done, but they opened the one in the front, but we're about to see to have to look back here, up there. Most of them can't make it. I don't know the workers, so they missed a great part of their daily routine to go to breakfast, get up with their little friends, go to have things on the river, doing senior citizen thing. That's taken away. So there's a lot of mental stress still residue from standing that is going on. Especially with our seniors, so we're always trying to find things for them to do, early in the day, we try to get them tense so that they can come out. We've incorporated open streets around yesterday. They got the revenue coming to have open streets again this year. So I found out by being there that a lot of seniors did walk down and bring like younger ones, like 2 year old, walk over there and they could have to do arts here to do play things. We have so many artists out there. So we have a lot of artists here that help take that into but it's still a lot of mental residue that when you come out your door, you have to see that it is very depressing, even if you're not a single citizen. The grit that comes into our apartments, when you sleep on the floor, you can tell that it's not regular dirt that, accumulates in the apartment. Some of us cannot open our windows, especially due to the Wednesday, breezy days, the amount of sand that comes in. The asthma rate scale was already high, they're extremely high, people are now having more asthma attacks and treatment issues. I don't have that, but I myself cannot open my window because I was blowing the scalpel and like this. I can literally open my window and walk out on it. Like, walk and feel like this, here. So if I want to open my window, I cannot do it out the time today. I'm constantly 24 hours during my air conditioning, which forces me to not burn it 24, but I cannot open my windows and I need to be able to breathe. Also, we have some phone animals, wild animals, we have cops here, we have raccoons, and we have cops. They
Hang out in the scaffolding? Yeah, yeah, but it's true.
So, it's just a little thing that we won't think of and build back up the one. So they're gonna do that. I think put a part up there. So that was gonna fly. So they told me to make sense. Look, I can no longer. I don't know. Raining outside. I don't know. Hitting my window like I have to go downstairs. Look out a little bit. See what's going on because I'm on the window. It looks great like this. So when I come out the front, it's sunshine. It's not just the sun. Move. It's just dark. Not dark or dark. Perfect. Always on my window. So it's just a little thing that I'm missing. When you discuss two windows, and in some of the apartments, one of the bedrooms has two windows. So they have a deviated one of those windows. Now, I don't know, I gotta find out, are they compensating those people for the inconvenience? What type of health effects will it have on them in the long term, with the taxes? So this is things that we're still trying to work through, but the main thing is that we're bringing the rate as inconvenient as it may be, but it needs to be done that at least we got the money because a lot of people who didn't buy the water and were affected horribly, they didn't get the money. And you know how hard it is to get anything for NYCHA, anything about NYCHA, those in there, members of the South. So we are grateful that we did get the money, but the main prayer is that it's completed in case something else.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. So what I'm going to do now, Matt, I'm going to cue you up, which is I'm going to introduce what you did. And so the newcomers can hear this. And like I said, focus on the operational response. So those of you from Houston, this is Matt Kraushar. He was dubbed Medical Matt for what he did for response. He was living in Van Brunnen. He was a medical student. He's now an MD, PhD, moved to Germany. And so because you guys are late, I'm sorry, you're not going to hear some of the anecdotal stuff. I'm asking him to focus now on the strategy, the operational details, how they actually came up with this medical response. Okay, Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Carolina. So, from the time I was a medical student, I had been reading a lot about how Hurricane Katrina affected that community. And I knew that in Red Hook, the biggest vulnerability would be the people in the community who had chronic medical conditions or medical conditions that were difficult to manage, even during normal times, but during flood times or post-flood times would be at great risk. So our biggest problem to solve was basically we needed to identify as many of these people in the population as possible. And so you ask yourself, well, how do you do that? You know, there's no list floating around of all of the vulnerable people who have medical problems in Red Hook who might need help. And because of, you know, essentially a complete utilities outage, we couldn't just call people. So what we decided to do at the time was create a large volunteer team. So I should say that I was working with really hundreds of volunteers, you know, organizing at the time to do this. And we basically created a risk assessment form, very simple, straightforward. And I think that's one of the keys of disaster response in general is keep it simple, keep it focused. So we, you know, had a very short list of questions and had people basically comb through the entire neighborhood. We basically knocked on every door in Red Hook at least 2 to 3 times to create.
Matt, are you talking about Red Hook NYCHA? Wasn't that the focus, or you're talking Red Hook the whole neighborhood?
I'm talking about the entirety of Red Hook,
Oh,
including.
I didn't realize you got outside in the private eye. Okay, great.
Everything from the front to the back. I mean, the whole Red Hook. So we wanted to create basically a mini census of people who would say that they were concerned that their medical conditions and their medical needs were not being met after the storm hit. And so, you know, we went through basically thousands of people to create a short list of people who communicated that they were at risk. And so we had a list then of several hundred people that we could focus on. And then once we had that high risk list, we basically performed what is known in medicine and in other fields as triage, where we could identify people as being very high risk, medium risk, and low risk. So a high risk person would be someone, for example, with diabetes who depended on daily insulin to stay alive. And they were not able to get regular access to their insulin because the phones were down, the pharmacies were closed, they were stuck in their apartments, and they couldn't get their insulin. Someone who was maybe lower risk is a person who is generally stable, maybe has some high blood pressure, and was not able to get their high blood pressure medication. Now that person is also a threat, you know, that they, if long enough without their high blood pressure medication could become a very serious problem. But someone who is an insulin dependent diabetic is really right now a person that has to be worried about. So they were triaged as high risk versus someone like the blood pressure person was lower risk. And then we basically went through the list in order, rank order of basically high risk down to low risk, going back into those homes that we had identified as risk people. But instead of sort of broad volunteers doing this, we had a smaller team of medically trained volunteers to go check on this risk list people. And these were medical volunteers from everything from EMTs, nursing students, medical students, fully trained doctors, residents, you know, across the spectrum of medical training. Myself at the time, I was a medical student, which was, you know, quite a, you know, it put me in a difficult situation, you know, trying to lead this recovery effort as a medical student. But I was really blessed to be working with some great volunteers who had high levels of medical training, including physicians, and went back into those homes and checked on those people, for example, the insulin dependent diabetic, and was able to do a bit more thorough of an evaluation of how much insulin do you have, how regularly do you take your insulin, what's your schedule, how much insulin will you need to get you through the next 2 weeks, this kind of thing. And we were able to connect those people to insulin via pharmacies or via other volunteer services to make sure that we could catch them before their health situation got out of control. Now, there were a couple cases, of course, where we went back and checked on those people and they were in really bad states. So we caught a few people just before they had a severe medical crisis. For example, you know, we caught someone basically mid heart attack, and we were able to rush them to the emergency room, and they were saved. But by and large, you know, we basically went through this entire risk list and created a working relationship with these individuals where we would check on them regularly. So after that initial visit, where we tried to meet their needs, we would then follow up with them on a regular basis. Of course, the high-risk people, we were following up with them very regularly. The lower risk people, maybe we'd only check on them once a week. But we did this for a roughly 2-month period after the storm to make sure that we could bridge these people from the storm onset to when medical services were starting to come back online and utilities were coming back online, and these people could resume their normal medical care. And I think what's important to realize here is that we were not in any way, and it was never our goal, to replace their normal medical care or replace their doctor or replace their pharmacy. We just wanted to serve as a bridge between these people who were isolated based on the conditions after the storm and make sure that they could reconnect with their pre-existing medical care. And so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We just wanted to connect them to the wheel that had already been in place for them before the storm. And that's what we did.
Matt,
And
Matt, can I, just because of the shortness of time, can I stop you there and see if there are any questions? Because we need to get to the rest of it. Is that okay?
Go for it.
Sorry, okay. So Matt was discussing with the local students before those of you from Houston arrived. Do any of you visitors have any questions or comments about what he said before we go to the next segment? Nothing?